Welcome, everybody, to another edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and we are back at 1925 Giants Drive, shadow of MetLife Stadium, which is right over there through the parking lot. And it is December cold at this point. It's going to be brutal this weekend. Fortunately for the Giants, they will be in Atlanta indoor stadium, and temps a little higher than they are here. But 2-12, record hasn't changed in the last 5 days since we've gone on air for 4 days when we did our post-game pod from MetLife. And it's time for the Atlanta Falcons. But some things have changed since then. So wanted to catch you up on it, get you ready for this weekend, and let's talk about what's going on with the New York Giants. The heat is still on. Head coach Brian Daboll, general manager Joe Schoen. I have not changed my stance. I still believe that they both should be back for next season. I believe that looking at the first 3 seasons and saying year one didn't happen when they won 9 games and a playoff game, first playoff game that they won since the Super Bowl, and then putting these 2 seasons together and pretending that year one didn't happen, or using year one and saying, well, the Giants have regressed since year one, when they really overshot the mark. They outkicked their coverage in year one and really changed the entire landscape of what Joe Schoen had hoped to do in year one. And that was evaluate everything behind the scenes, evaluate the roster, and then go into year 2 with an opportunity to draft a quarterback potentially and be in striking distance, and then also have the opportunity to reassess where this team is and start on a true rebuild. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Joe Schoen has not told me this personally, but I truly believe that had the Giants season gone differently in 2022, the Giants would have gone away from Daniel Jones. He would have been a former Giant. They would have let him hit the market. And I believe that Saquon Barkley would have been a former Giant at that point at the end of 2022, and that they would have done a full rebuild. Again, that has to do with where their draft status was. They were picking 26th, ended up trading down to 25th to draft Tay Banks that second year. But had they struggled in year one and finished with the 4 or 5 wins that everyone expected them to, then they would have been picking a lot earlier and maybe would have had an opportunity to go after a C.J. Stroud, who Brian Daboll loved and Joe Schoen loved when he was at Ohio State. So, again, it's revisionist history. It didn't happen, but you can't pretend that the ramifications from year one did not affect what they did in year 2 and year 3. And what we're seeing in year 3 now is a semblance of a true rebuild. And I think it's hard to embrace that because of the decisions that they made in 2022 and after 2022. Let's not forget, the Giants didn't make a trade for a wide receiver at the trade deadline in year 1. Joe Schoen could have traded draft assets to get Jerry Jeudy here. There was the idea that they would have Jerry Jeudy on the market, and he was on the market for Denver. But the Giants would not pay that price because Joe Schoen held true and said, we're going to take this team as far as we can get them. We're going to claim Isaiah Hodgins, and he's going to become our number 1 receiver in 2022. But we're not going to go crazy and compensate because we need to keep flexibility for 2023, 2024. Now, that changed at the end of 2022. But I ask you honestly, what would your reaction have been if after that season, after the Giants won their first playoff game since Super Bowl 46, a decade of despair before that, would the Giants have gotten away with their fan base had they said goodbye to Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? There is no way. Some of you would have. I know that. My guy Will, 20, I know you would have signed on for the Giants moving past Daniel Jones, and Saquon Barkley, regardless of what happened in 2022. So all of those who want to look at this entire regime and forget the good points of what happened in 2022 and how the ramifications of that set them up for 23 and 24, you're going to forget about it. That's fine. That's what we do. If you're an emotional fan, you want to talk about it, but you can't escape that reality. So that's where we're at going to this weekend. Giants are 2-12, and they have lost 9 in a row. Ties the longest winning streak in franchise history. The longest winning streak is at 9. Well, if they lose on Sunday, it is now the longest losing streak in the history of the New York Giants. I mean, that is not the way you want to celebrate 100 years of a franchise. But that's the reality, and that's what they have to deal with. So, again, I say this as the dirty little secret in the NFL. For your future, you want to lose as many games as possible to get the best draft pick. But what it does to your present and the guys that are here and the players that are here and the coaches and everyone whose jobs are on the line, it's a terrible situation to be in. So there's nothing more than the 2024 Giants need than a win on Sunday. But the 2025 Giants, the 2026 Giants, need 3 more losses. Because finishing at 2-15, the Giants will have no lower than the number 2 overall pick for next year. And that will more than likely mean Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward are the quarterback of this franchise moving forward. There are no guarantees that they will be stars in this league, but you have to take the swing when the swing is there. So let's go into this weekend. Drew Lock will be the starting quarterback, and it's just one of those things where for the first time since 1992, the Giants have played 4 different quarterbacks. That happened last week with Tim Boyle. So now you've got Tommy DeVito coming back from concussion protocol. He's looked pretty good in practice, so he will likely be the backup. Tim Boyle will go back to being the emergency quarterback on the inactive list this Sunday, and it'll be Drew Lock's show. On the other side of the ball, that will be another storyline this weekend. Michael Penix. Giants passed on him at 6, took Malik Neighbors, and Michael Penix gets his first career start in Atlanta, replacing Kirk Cousins, and he will face a team that was in the quarterback market and passed on him. So I know there's a lot of talk about, well, if he plays well against the Giants, he's going to show that Joe Shane and Brian Dable did not do a great job picking a quarterback by passing on Penix. Look at Bo Nix. Look at J.J. McCarthy. I mean, I see people using J.J. McCarthy as a reason to get rid of Brian Dable and Joe Shane. J.J. McCarthy has had 2 knee surgeries and hasn't played it down this season. So how do you use passing on J.J. McCarthy as a reason to fire these guys? It's just one of those things where it's 3 more games, and then we're going to find out where the Giants go from here. The one big injury this week, and Brian Dable believes he's going to play on Sunday, is Brian Burns. He's not practicing today, did not practice on Wednesday, has an ankle injury, so they're just trying to get him as healthy as possible for Sunday. So we'll see what that presents. So let's talk bigger picture. When I did the podcast last Friday, it was from the Heisman. Told you on the post-game podcast, it kind of caught you up with Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, what that was all about. So that's still where we're at. I thought it was interesting. Deion Sanders, Shedeur's dad and his coach at Colorado, was on the Adam Pac-Man Jones podcast, and Pac-Man was really pushing the Raiders narrative for Shedeur. And when you listen to Deion, it certainly sounds like he has heard through the grapevine that if the Giants have the number 1 pick, he believes that Shedeur will be a Giant. So take that for what it's worth. Deion's trying to create a little bit of a market that may or may not have to be created with Shedeur at this point. But the narrative that Deion was not going to want Shedeur Sanders with the Giants, he's tried to debunk that at every turn over the last week or so. going out on social media saying it's a lie that he wants to force Shedeur to Las Vegas. And that, of course, brings up questions about Tankathon and Sunday. So what happens? Well, if the Giants win, it's possible that they can fall all the way to 7th in the draft order because of strength of schedule. And if they lose and the Raiders beat the Jaguars, well, then the Giants will have the inside track on the number 1 pick with 2 weeks remaining. Giants have only had the number 1 pick twice in their history, never in the merger draft with both leagues. So that's where we're at. I wrote a story about Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy trying to become just the second post-merger, that's 1970, rookie duo to have 1,000 yards from scrimmage each. Neighbors and Tracy are under 100 yards away from that. I have a question from Eric Stanson from our favorite tailgate, K12. And Eric wanted to know if Neighbors gets to 100 catches and 1,000 yards this week, do you think he gets shut down? No, I don't think the Giants will shut Neighbors down. I think they want to have an opportunity just to let him play. Now, if he was hurt, it's a different story. He's banged up. There's a difference. Learning how to play injured, and I think he's done that. I think they'd love to give him an opportunity to try to go after Puka Nakua's rookie reception record, which is 105. Nakua said it last year. But with 10 catches last week for Malik, he's within striking distance. 3 games left. He's 15 away, 16 from breaking the record. Now, obviously, Brock Bowers is tied with him at 90 receptions, him being a tight end, but he's alive for that record, for Nakua's record. I think the Giants will try to get Malik to play. And look, you want to go into that Colts game, the final home game, you want to give your fans somebody to watch, and Malik Neighbors is that player. So we'll see what happens, but I do appreciate that thought, Eric. And the other one, more of a bigger picture coaching situation from Tony. If Daves returns, he doesn't think any of the coordinators return. So what are thoughts on Robert Saleh as DC? And I'm not sure it's about players buying into Shane Bowen's system. I think one thing you have to watch is that Bowen was very comfortable with Mike Vrabel. So it may not even be the Giants' choice per se. If Mike Vrabel gets a job, they may be looking for Shane Bowen to come with him as defensive coordinator. I think the problem with what you're going to do for coordinators, if Dable comes back, is the idea that you're really going to be in the situation that a lot of people speculated on last year that I don't know necessarily was 100% true, in that if they're in a lame duck situation, how many coordinators, how many young, good coordinators or proven commodities want to take a chance and join a staff that may be a one and done? So that's something you have to think of, Tony, when you're talking about guys. Is that something that Robert Saleh, is that a best opportunity for him to latch on somewhere that in a year's time that coaching staff might not be back across the board? Now, offensively, it wouldn't surprise me to see if Shea Tierney is bumped up to offensive coordinator. But again, those questions, I think we have to see what happens with Daves after the season, what happens with Joe Shane, and where John Mara wants to go with this franchise. Then we can kind of really talk about opportunities and where guys and who can come in and really be fits here with the New York Giants. So that's where we're at with that. Other than that, we will not have a post-game podcast this week. I am not going to be in Atlanta. I will be doing our normal coverage from home, so sticking back in the area to watch the game. I'll give you everything I can get after the game through text, reporting, and just observing and where we're at. Sunday, Giants are at 1. The Raiders-Jaguars game is at 4. So if you lose, if you're the Giants and you lose, you're going to really be focusing in on that Raiders-Jaguars game to see if you can get into that number one spot and stay there with 2 weeks to go. So again, for producer Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Appreciate you listening and watching this week, and we will be back next week. Not sure of the timing, so with that, I will say from all of us at All In, have a very merry All In Christmas and an All In Happy Hanukkah, and we will be back after the holidays, getting ready for the final 2 games of the season for the New York Giants, and then we enter a off-season like several that we've had over the last 15 years. We're not sure where they're going to be in terms of head coach, general manager, quarterback, roster. All that is on the table. So stick with us here at All In. But take some time, count your blessings over these holidays, because I know I will. And then we'll be back all in next week. Appreciate you listening and watching, as always.